Uganda's opposition leader Bobi Wine, in an exclusive interview with the SABC, calls on the country's Chief Justice to resign. Meanwhile, South Africa's Health Minister Dr. Zweli Mkhize reflects on the year of South Africa under COVID-19 lockdown regulations. Good evening, I'm Aldrin Simpier, and this is African Perspective. And we start off here. Uganda's opposition leader Robert Kyagulanyi has called on the Chief Justice of Uganda's Supreme Court to resign. In an exclusive interview with the SABC, Kyagulanyi, better known as Bobi Wine, says Justice Alfonse Owiny-Dollo has shamed the court. The Chief Justice has been accused by another court justice of giving her unlawful instructions in a matter before the court relating to the disputed January 2021 elections. The Electoral Commission declared President Yoweri Museveni the victor of the disputed elections, which the African Union is yet to pronounce on its credibility. South Africa, meanwhile, has also been silent on the elections, which have been marred by violence. But Kyagulanyi tells me in that interview, silence sometimes means complicity. Mr. Kyagulanyi, thank you so much for making time for us. First of all, I want to find out how you are doing personally as one of the opposition leaders in Uganda.
Thank you very much for having me. Well, as long as I'm alive, I want to believe that I'm all right. Although we live in very tough conditions, but we thank God that we are still alive and going.
You're happy that you're still alive and going. What does that mean, though?
Well, we live every day like, as if it's a last day. We live through intimidation. We live through daily government-sanctioned abductions and murders, where young men and women are abducted, and their crime is supporting me on being part of my campaign team through the presidency. Many are still missing in hundreds. Over 600 people are missing, and their families don't know where they are. But they were seen and others filmed being taken away by men in military uniform in unnumbered cars. Thousands are in prison for only wearing a beret like the one I'm wearing, and they're being charged in military courts. So that's the kind of situation that we are grappling with in Uganda. And this follows a stolen election, which was held under total darkness, internet completely shut down, media, especially international media, completely gagged, and local media completely controlled. So that's what we are grappling with as a country. But other than that, we are holding our hope alive.
You once referred to him as a revolutionary. Do you feel that that has changed in him? This is now speaking about President Museveni.
Certainly. It's ironic that I once was inspired by General Museveni, and not only him, his whole generation inspired us. I was named Robert by my parents after Robert Mugabe when he was a prized revolutionary before he reduced himself to a despised autocrat. The same thing with General Museveni when he was around my age and when he was, struggling for what he called freedom, for what all our parents believed was freedom that he was struggling for. He spoke just what rebellion that consumed more than 500,000 Ugandan lives, but it was all justified because he presented his case. He was fighting against a dictatorship that steals elections. He was protesting a stolen election.
As someone who was inspired by him, and you also speak about your parents naming you after Robert Mugabe, where do you think for General Museveni things really changed and his attitude towards governance and his attitude towards democratic dispensation?
Well, General Museveni reminds me of the saying that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. I think it was power that got in his head. I think he ultimately got corrupt. If he was not lying in the beginning, then he must have gotten corrupt with the ultimate power, with the impunity. And Ultimately, he realized that the people of Uganda had seen all the lies that he had been taking them through. And that is why we believe that to cure Uganda of future Musevenis, of future Idi Amins, is to focus on empowering institutions. General Museveni killed all the institutions in Uganda. He is the institution. He controls the parliament, he controls the police, the military, and the judiciary. It explains why the parliament today is largely seen as a rubber stamp for General Museveni's desires. And every few times that the parliament has seemed to stand its ground, it has been raided by the military. Case in point is when it was raided during a sitting that I also was attending, when General Museveni was trying to push through an amendment to the constitution that empowers him to be president for life.
Ahead of the elections, the United Nations spoke about concerns of a crackdown by the security force. What's your understanding of how the United Nations characterize what happened ahead of the elections?
Well, we appreciate the United Nations and all international voices that have raised concern about the people of Uganda. But unfortunately, many at times, this has only been words. These have been only strong statements. As we speak right now, the people of Uganda are being abducted, murdered. The men are being castrated like animals. The women are being raped. The few that have been lucky to survive those torture chambers have shown up with their eyes plucked out, with their fingernails plucked out, their manhoods shattered. All that is happening in real time. It did not only happen yesterday, or we are not thinking it's going to happen tomorrow. It is happening in real time. Just the day before yesterday, my elder brother's house was raided. He managed to run away from the soldiers, the Uganda People's Defense Forces, a section in the military called Special Forces Command, led by General Museveni's son, Muhoozi Kainerugaba. These are the people abducting Ugandans. A 15-year-old adopted nephew of mine was taken away, and up to now, nobody knows where he is. It has been normalized. All this is happening in full sight of the United Nations, in full sight of our other development partners. Just the other day, when we had taken our petition to United Nations Human Rights Office in Kampala, we were attacked by the military. Journalists were beaten. Some had their bones broken. Elected members of parliament were beaten. All this is happening in full view of the international community. While we get a strong statement of criticism every here and there, the people of Uganda would want to feel like their life is valued equally. The international community has stood up against many atrocities being committed. We hope to see them stand much more stronger than they are. I mean, General Museveni blocked the European Union election observers and the United States election observers. And indeed, the European Union came out and condemned that, but it only took a few weeks to see a possible cooperation with General Museveni. We've always asserted that the United Nations, all development partners, the United States and European Union should, at least for the people of Uganda and for the values that bring us together, hold General Museveni accountable.
How? How should they do that? How should they do that?
Prefer targeted sanctions. Leaders that have abused human rights constantly, like the ones in Myanmar, have been sanctioned. We've called for targeted sanctions for General Museveni, his son Muhoozi Kainerugaba, and all those officers in the security forces that use their offices to abuse rights, to murder people with impunity, and to torture them. We've also asked the international community to, ban General Museveni and his government from some engagements. But most importantly, we have petitioned the International Criminal Court. And I hope our voices and our point can be seen by the International Criminal Court.
Since you've taken that petition to the International Criminal Court, has there been any response?
Well, we got a response that it was received and it was being reviewed. But again, recently, precisely last week, we amended it to include his son, General Muhoozi Kainerugaba, who commands the Special Forces Command, and who General Museveni came out on national TV and actually said that it is that section of the military that is holding these people who are civilians, who are not soldiers. They're holding them incommunicado. Many of them have reportedly died. So General Museveni gave us more information that it is his son that is commanding these abductions. So we amended our petition to include the son.
Okay. Is the force also behind the 54 people who were killed in November?
Well, General Museveni talks about 54 people killed, but our human rights desk has recorded more than 100 deaths between 18th and 19th of November. These are murders that were sanctioned by General Museveni and indeed carried out by the military and the police and some government operatives that were holding assault rifles but in plain clothes. General Museveni came out chest thumping and said that he knew that protests were going in town and he ordered the military to sort them out. And indeed, they sorted them out by murdering those citizens.
He refers to them in an interview with CNN as rioters.
Well, it's unfortunate that even when people who are protesting peacefully in Uganda are responded to by live gunshots and tear gas, and whenever they're tear gassed, some of them will run away. And that is what General Museveni presents as rioters. He has not justified that they were rioters. But again, he said that 30 of them were rioters, while the rest were people, citizens going about their, usual business. I must always say that General Museveni has tried as much as possible to brand any dissenting voice as a violent voice. He has tried as much as possible to brand any protest as a riot. We have constantly called for peaceful protests because we don't believe in violence. But he has constantly bragged as to be the master of violence. And therefore, he uses violence and justifies violence. Painfully, he has always gotten away from with it.
Was there a response from the African Union chairperson at the time, Cyril Ramaphosa?
Well, we did not reach out, personally to the African Union head, but we reached out to the African Union. Unfortunately, we've not had a response, not only from the African Union, but also from the East African community.
So what do you make of how slow leaders on the continent were to almost validate through congratulating the President Yoweri Museveni, on his re-election?
Thank you very much. First of all, we appreciate the distancing of very many African leaders from the outright dictatorship of General Museveni. Otherwise, they would seem shabby associating with outright impunity, with outright dictatorship. Although still some leaders, unfortunately, congratulated General Museveni over usurping the voice of the people of Uganda, congratulated him for switching off the internet, for killing, slaughtering hundreds of people, for abductions of people, etc. But I'm glad that many African leaders did not associate themselves with that criminality. However, I must say that silence is not enough. Sometimes silence is complicit because historically, we as Africans have been known for standing with each other and for, calling out on injustice and impunity and lawlessness. So they should not just keep quiet or distance themselves from criminality. They should call it out on it, especially that we are bound together under the African Union. It is formed, first of all, as one of the values is African freedom, and the same generation that formed the African Union taught us that Africa is not free when all of us are not free. So we call upon them not just to be silent, but to actually speak out on the situation in Uganda.
Okay, so the declaration that came from the Electoral Commission was that the National Unity Platform got 34.8% of the votes. And then on the other end, you have the National Resistance Movement that got 58.6% of the vote. Do you think that you, as the leader of the National Unity Platform, should bear some of the responsibility for the party's performance at the polls?
First and foremost, what the Electoral Commission declared is completely fraudulent, is completely false, and it has nothing to do with the election whatsoever. I can tell you that General Museveni could not even garner 10% of the vote. The Electoral Commission was taken over by the military and the police, having switched off the internet completely, having deported most critical international journalists and denied many of them accreditation, having taken over the local media, TVs and radio stations by the military. General Museveni went ahead to declare the results that were not anywhere connected to the election. When you analyze the polling stations, we won on majority of the polling stations. And we must also note that in the regions of northern Uganda and western Uganda, the majority of people actually did not vote because the military went with military trucks with hundreds of soldiers from polling station to polling station, taking all available presidential ballot papers in favor of General Museveni. And also, this was captured on camera. The Electoral Commission claimed that in hundreds of polling stations, the voters had turned out 100% as they had registered in the voters register to vote. And they apparently all voted for General Museveni. Now, in many areas where the Electoral Commission claims that voters turned out 100%, and all that 100% voted for General Museveni, we have evidence of very many voters that actually died years or months before the election. We have that evidence in form of death certificates from their families. And we also have some families, some family members that were registered in some polling stations in distant regions in the country that were not able to vote because they were wanted by the military and some had been actually arrested. But apparently, according to the Electoral Commission, all these people voted. So this is the kind of evidence that the Supreme Court rejected in the petition. Mm-hmm. So I want to categorically mention that the Electoral Commission's announcement were fraudulent. Even with all the electoral malpractices, even with the ballot stuffing, even with the outright blockages of, results coming through radio stations, we were able to at least have 25,000 declaration forms collected. And these declaration forms, where we don't know, because we had 34,000 polling stations. Out of those, we were only able to get 25,000.
But the Supreme Court, though, is arguing that you came too late to amend that petition.
As a matter of fact, I did not come too late. First of all, I must mention that it took the High Court of Uganda to free me from military detention. I was put under house arrest here in my house for 11 days, and yet our law provides for 15 days within which one must petition the Supreme Court. Now, it took the High Court of Uganda to order the military to leave my house after 11 days, which did not leave until it was 12 days in detention. I worked within 3 days to ensure that I file a case. But according to our law and according to the precedents that has been set by the same court, one has been able to amend their petition. For example, in the previous election of 2016, Honorable Amama Mbabazi was able to amend his electoral petition. However, the same Supreme Court in 2001 and 2011 accepted evidence from Dr. Besigye all through the hearing. But in an unprecedented manner, the same Supreme Court blocked my evidence, which I was presenting way before the hearing began. I had explained to the Supreme Court that I was unable to bring all the evidence at once because, one, I had been under house arrest. Number two, all our agents, many of them were being held and are still being held by the military. So they had not given us evidence. Others are in prison. I must remind the world that my entire campaign team was rounded up together with me at Kalangala Islands. We were arrested 2 weeks before the election. Only me alone, I was driven to my house, but everybody else was taken to a military court and charged, and they continue to be in prison up to today for no reason whatsoever other than supporting me and being.
Why do you think that's happening? Why do you think the Supreme Court is behaving in this an unequal approach to things? There's disparity in how the Supreme Court has dealt with previous matters compared to how it's dealing with your specific case.
Well, I will say that General Museveni has usurped the powers of all institutions. We don't have an independent judiciary. I must be quick to also mention that we have some really strong and firm judges. For example, one judge called Justice Chisache actually stood and called out the Chief Justice for behaving with impunity, for breaking the law, and for defiling the image of the Supreme Court and the office of the Chief Justice. And when the Chief Justice confiscated her file, blocking her from delivering her dissenting judgment. General Museveni, like all dictators in the past history of Uganda, has had, the judiciary captured. He is the one that appoints these judges. So he promised some years ago that he will appoint cadre judges, and probably these are the cadre judges that he mentioned. I also want to mention that the Chief Justice himself has conducted himself in a completely immoral way. He went ahead to meet General Museveni publicly 3 times and probably privately many more times when he had a presidential petition on his desk. As Chief Justice went ahead to request General Museveni for some favors, and yet he was presiding over a petition where General Museveni's presidency was questioned. The Chief Justice also made a statement suggesting that next year General Museveni would be president. Now, he made that statement only days after he had received a petition from us. These and many other deeds and utterances convinced us that we would not get justice in the Supreme Court, and that is why I withdrew that petition from the Supreme Court, because the Chief Justice was clearly biased and was not showing any sign of giving us justice.
One of the accusations also that came from the attorneys in this matter was that the Chief Justice was also part of the President's 2006 legal counsel in a similar case where the elections were being disputed. And the argument was there that he should recuse himself as the Chief Justice and allow the other justices to preside over the matter. But of course, he has refused. What do you make of that?
Well, that further exposes the Supreme Court. And I said it even before I took that petition to the Supreme Court, because many Ugandans were skeptical about the same. And they advised us not to go to the Supreme Court because it was just being used as a rubber stamp to legitimize General Museveni's fraudulent and illegitimate presidency. However, I spoke to the people of Uganda and I told them that we are going to the Supreme Court to get either of the two things. We will either get justice or we will be able to expose the injustice that the Supreme Court is presiding over. I'm very glad that even before we could expose the Supreme Court, the Chief Justice decided to bear all the injustice, to show it to the entire world. So this actually has created a crisis in the Supreme Court. Like I've said, not all is lost with the judicial system here in Uganda. We still have some patriotic judges. For example, Justice Chisache said in her words that she disobeyed the illegal orders of the Chief Justice. Apparently, the Chief Justice was ordering her not to give her dissenting judgment, and he confiscated her file and ordered for the closure of the Supreme Court on a working day because he knew that it was exposed. He knew that he was exposed. And it's clear that the Chief Justice is on the tunes of General Museveni, which is very, very unfortunate, which sets a very bad image for the judiciary in Uganda.
Yeah. Justice Esther also says, though, that she didn't circulate that minority judgment. She would have done that, but there wasn't time to do it. However, though, this has now played out in front of the media. What's the next step? What should happen now in terms of the Supreme Court?
Well, the most moral thing would be for the Chief Justice to resign because he has abused office, he has shamed the image of the courts of law. He is supposed to be the embodiment of the rule of law, but he has acted with outright impunity. The most moral thing would be for him to resign. But of course, under any dictatorship, most institutions of state are just, a shadow of themselves. We know that he does not have the power. We know that all the power lies in the hands of those that have guns that can enforce their will on the people of Uganda. When we withdrew the case from the Supreme Court, we said that we're taking the matter to the court of the people, and ultimately the people of Uganda will have to assert themselves and liberate their own country.
And if he doesn't resign, what happens?
Well, if he doesn't resign, the same thing happens like when General Museveni forces himself on the people of Uganda. Certainly, the Chief Justice does not have any moral authority whatsoever to preside over matters. But is Uganda being ruled by the law? My answer is no. Is there any respect for the rule of law? The answer is no. Does the court have any power? The answer is no. As a matter of fact, General Museveni now has resorted to using military courts, otherwise known as kangaroo courts. If one is caught demonstrating, or if one is caught wearing this beret, or if one is caught wearing a t-shirt with my image, or riding a car with a sticker written on National Unity Platform or any poster that shows my image, they are immediately arrested, kept away for days, if not months, tortured, and then later presented in military courts, which military courts remand them indefinitely.
Okay. Now, considering that you have withdrawn the application from the Supreme Court, and there's also judgment that has been handed down now by the Supreme Court, of course, which Justice Esther disagrees with. What happens now for the National Unity Platform? Does this mean that this is the end of your fight of what you call an unlawful election, a declaration of Yoweri Museveni's success?
Certainly not. We were the People Power Movement before we formed a political wing of the People Power Movement, which is the National Unity Platform that went into this election and won it decisively. Unfortunately, the Electoral Commission aided General Museveni together with the military to undermine the voice of the people of Uganda. We shall continue using all legal and peaceful means.
What legal peaceful means are there when you have withdrawn this court application?
Well, the Supreme Court is not the only legal mean. It is not the last legal mean. Article 3 of our Constitution provides that the people of Uganda, that all Ugandans shall do everything within their power to restore constitutional rule once it has been overthrown.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
It means that the people of Uganda must rise to the occasion and do everything within their power, and of course within the law, to restore, constitutionalism once it has been overthrown.
Does that mean taking to the streets?
That means taking to the streets and more. And I was still quoting for you our constitution. Article 29 indeed empowers the people of Uganda to demonstrate and protest within the law. It is within the law for the people of Uganda to go to the streets. It is within the law for the people of Uganda to protest. So we are encouraging the people of Uganda to take on all legal and non-violent means to ensure that their voice is asserted.
Well, and Yoweri Museveni has been in power since 1986, the 76-year-old still leading the nation of Uganda, and has been secured his 6th term after that declaration from the Electoral Commission of Uganda. We've come to the end of that conversation. We'd love to hear some of your thoughts. He's also extended an invitation to the Ugandan government to give them an opportunity for a right of reply. We go to a quick ad break. When we come back, we'll reflect on the year that was under COVID-19 regulations here in South Africa.